Hello, and welcome to Hopeful Conversations, brought to you by Robbie's Hope Foundation. I am your host, Kari Eckert. Joining me today is Kelsey Alpaio, a journalist and editor with a passion for innovative storytelling. As a senior associate editor at Harvard Business Publishing, Kelsey works to develop new content and audiences for the company. Her work focuses on managing mental health in the workplace and dealing with life's obstacles. Thank you for joining me today, Kelsey.
Thank you for having me.
Let's just go ahead and get started. How can people maintain a healthy balance while juggling school, work, extracurricular activities, and personal responsibilities?
That's a great question. I feel like balancing everything can feel super, super overwhelming. It's one of the hardest parts, I think, between, making that transition from college into work life is suddenly you're navigating, not just learning the job that you've gotten, you're learning how to make new friends in the city, you're learning how to set boundaries and figure out who you are and what you want to do with your life. I think one of the best ways to create that balance is first of all to give yourself like a little bit of space, time, and grace. I think I know personally when I was making that transition from college to work life, I had this overwhelming feeling that everything needed to be in place immediately. And I think if I could give myself some advice for back then, it would be to give myself time and give myself space to figure out what I actually wanted my life to look like and take a step back and say to myself, it's okay that I don't have everything figured out. Like I have tons of time in my life to have everything figured out, although I still don't. But I definitely don't need to have it figured out right away, especially right when you're making that transition. So first and foremost, like give yourself some grace and be kind to yourself when you're trying to figure out balance. It takes a lot of work to find the right balance, and there's a lot of things at play. It's not just you and what you want. It's, what your organization that you're working at is demanding. It's what your friends and family are asking of you. And so just be kind to yourself. That's my first piece of advice.
It's a very good piece of advice. I think we could all be kinder to ourselves. In your answer, you visited did you feel a lot of pressure when you made that transition to have everything figured out, to have that balance?
Yeah, I did. And I think it comes a little bit from, what you see on TV and in movies where, your early 20s or when you're transitioning from your teens to your 20s, this idea that like your life is going to be perfect. You're going to be living in like the city that you always wanted to live in, and you're going to have all the friends and you're going to be, hanging out constantly with them. I think there's a lot of societal pressure that comes with making that transition from college into your work life. And I definitely felt that. And I think, it took a couple years for me to figure out that the pressure was coming from inside the house, I guess, if you want to say. Like I was putting a lot of that pressure on myself, and it took a couple of years to step back and actually, define my values and define what I wanted out of, my early career and my early life after graduating college to kind of relieve some of that pressure. Yeah.
Yeah, I will tell you, as a 50-year-old female, the transitions of life, like those periods do come back, and that like finding that grace for
Hmm.
yourself, and just like I think social media plays into it. Like we think that things are supposed to be perfect, and it's not always the way that it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
You talk a lot about the importance of dealing with change, which we're just visiting about, and
Hmm.
change sometimes causing fear. How can individuals develop a mindset that embraces change and sees it potentially as an opportunity for growth and self improvement?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talk a lot about change and I write a lot about change at work as well because it is something I am so afraid of. It's one of kind of the biggest triggers for me for the anxiety that I experience is moments of transition and change. Um, I think back again to when I graduated college, that was a change, a big change. I think about like when I quit my first job and made that transition. That was one of the hardest decisions I felt like I had to make in my early career. And I think what got me through those periods of change again was giving myself some grace, but also understanding that I came across this quote and it made a really big difference in my life, and I'd like to share it. It was
I'd love.
about decision making, and it was this idea that um, you're never going to make the right decision, but you are going to make every decision right. So it's kind of this idea of like, I was so afraid of making the right or wrong decision. When I graduated college, am I taking the right job? Am I moving to the right city? Am I making the right decision doing this, not, doing something else that I could be doing? Same thing with, quitting my first job. Am I making the right choice moving to this other role, moving to this other organization? Am I going to regret this? And I really, really thought about these decisions over and over and over again, and it caused me so much anxiety. um, and when I found this quote that was kind of like, there is no such thing as a right or wrong decision, but you have the power to make any decision you make the right one. It really empowered me to get through those moments of change because um, it gave me faith in myself to be
Mm.
able to conquer anything that came across my way. I knew that like whatever decision I made, I would be able to get through it. And that itself, I think, takes a lot of practice. Like I wasn't always able to do that, but getting to a place where I could have that confidence and resilience to say, it's okay no matter what decision I make because I'll figure it out. It's really freeing, but also really hard to get there.
Hmm. That's powerful. You are never going to make every right decision. You are going to make every decision right.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
like that. And that made you feel empowered, which led to faith in yourself and it's a practice
Yeah.
and building your confidence and realizing that how resilient you are.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quite beautiful. Pretty wise for that's I like that a lot. What role does self-care play in managing change and promoting overall well-being during transitional periods?
Self-care plays a big role. I think going back to balance as well, self-care is a big part of that. And I think, uh, tying back to that conversation too around social media, I think self-care looks different for everybody. So when I hear the word self-care, the first things I think of are like your skin routine and like taking a bath and doing like face peels, that kind of stuff. And again, I think it took me some time to realize that my self-care can look very different from that. I don't necessarily enjoy those things don't bring me peace of mind. They don't reduce my anxiety. But over time I found the things that do that for me. For example, for me, I like going for walks. If I'm feeling stressed or anxious, I leave my computer, I just drop everything and I go outside and I go for a walk and I look at the flowers and I look at the birds and I find things that I enjoy, that bring me joy in the moment. That's a big piece of self-care for me. Um, I think also just doing things I enjoy. Like I feel like for a long time, I wouldn't let myself enjoy certain things like playing video games or doing certain arts and crafts, like enjoying my hobbies. I was kind of like, no, I need to work hard. I need to keep heads down. I need to, do everything right so that I can achieve the career goals I want. And I realized so quickly that that's not the way to achieve the goals that you want. If you just stay heads down and never acknowledge the things that you want to be doing, the things that you want to do to care for yourself, you're never going to actually achieve those goals that you've set out for yourself. So yeah, I think self-care plays a really important part in all of this, but I think it's a matter of finding what actually works for you and not just following the things that you see on social media that are labeled self-care.
I agree. I agree. I would say my best daily practice of self-care is getting some form of exercise.
Yeah.
It, it just makes me feel better and it makes me be more productive, and
Hmm.
so many different things. It makes me sleep better, just a lot of
Yes.
different things.
Hmm.
I like how you said taking a walk. I just had another guest, and she would define that as micro joys, like finding what
Yes.
brings you something that you can recognize in that moment.
Yes. I'm all about micro joys. I think that's great.
In one of your articles, you defined the term catastrophize. I can't, you're going to say this for me.
Catastrophizing. I also have a hard time with
Catastrophizing.
it.
Yeah. Can you tell us about catastrophizing, what it means, and potentially how to shift away from it?
Yeah, so catastrophizing is this idea of expecting the worst in any situation. So um, let me think of an example. So an example we talk about in the work setting a lot is receiving a message from your boss that says, "Hey, can we talk later?" Dot dot dot. So catastrophizing would be, "Oh my gosh, I've done something horribly wrong. My boss is going to fire me. This is the end of my career. This is the worst thing that's ever going to happen. I'm so nervous about this conversation." And obviously, that way of thinking can cause a lot of anxiety. It can cause you to ruminate and can cause you to kind of go into a spiral. Um, and so, one way, there's tons of ways to kind of combat catastrophizing, but one way that you can think about moving on from that way of thinking is to actually allow yourself to think of that worst case scenario, but then forcing yourself to also think about the best case scenario. So, best case scenario, your boss messages you randomly. Best case scenario is, oh my gosh, they're going to give me a promotion. I'm going to get a raise, and this is going to be the start of like my next big career move. Um, Sounds kind of just as ridiculous as the I'm going to get fired because they messaged me. So, what you want to do then is kind of find the middle ground. What's the middle option? That's going to be the most likely thing to happen. So, it's a way of kind of, helping your brain create this scale of options and then finding the middle ground that is the most likely scenario. So most likely scenario of your boss messaging you saying, "Hey, we should talk later." The ideal thing, the thing that's probably going to happen is they just have a new assignment for you or want to go over something that you submitted earlier that day. And that's kind of the middle ground, most likely option. So yeah, that's one way. Again, there's tons of different ways you can approach catastrophizing.
I like that as well. The scale of options, let your brain find it.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yep.
such human nature to go to that worst place, like making it a catastrophe. Like it's just kind of how so many of us are wired.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that has helped me with my own personal anxiety was learning more about like the human nature of anxiety and where it actually comes from, and the fact that, deep down your anxiety is there to protect you. Your brain is trying to protect you, and that's why it's coming up with all of these scenarios. And that helped me so much kind of forgive myself a little bit. Again, show myself some grace for having those feelings, because suddenly I understood where those feelings were coming from. And I'm able to now like thank my brain. I can say like, "Thank you, brain, for giving me that option and trying to protect me, but we're going to have this other thought instead." So yeah, it's interesting.
That is interesting. Thank you, brain. Something we don't do that too often, do we? Thank ourselves or
No.
allow
Yeah.
ourselves grace, but somehow we are able to extend grace to others, some of us very freely.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I might be speaking to myself there. Um, your portfolio has a lot of articles on goal setting, which can be hard for some people, me included. What advice do you have for teens and young adults when it comes to goal setting to prepare for the future?
Ooh, that's another great question. Um, I think my biggest piece of advice, especially if you feel anxious a lot of the time, um, is to set micro goals. I think one of my biggest challenges with goal setting is I tend to aim like way too big. I create the biggest goal possible because I'm a very ambitious person. Like I've got big dreams, I've got big goals, and so I tend to set the biggest goal possible, and that can be so overwhelming. Like the moment you might be excited about it when you first set it, but then when you think about, okay, how am I going to get there? It becomes this like super overwhelming, anxiety inducing situation. Um, so I really like setting micro goals, and that can be something as small as, like, say you want to read 52 books this year. You want to read a book every week. To say that is extremely scary. It's like, how am I going to do that? I have so many other things going on in my life. But to set the goal of, I want to read 5 pages a day, that is a much smaller, more achievable goal, something that you can actually visualize. You can think about what time you're going to dedicate to it every day. So that's just an example of like a reading goal, but you can apply that to any goal that you have in your life, whether it's, getting a dream job or getting into the college that you're really excited to get into. You can kind of break those down into much, much smaller goals that aren't quite as overwhelming. So that's my favorite piece of advice. And then also, like, if you want to scale that up just a little bit, I think about this a lot with especially like New Year's resolutions where people make goals for the whole year. I like to make monthly goals instead. So instead of looking at a goal for the entire year, I'll look at it for a month. Like, I can picture 30 days in my head. I know what 30 days feels like. It's a lot harder to picture what a year feels like. So how can I split that goal up, write down the things that I want to do every day to achieve that goal? Um, Again, just another way to kind of like shrink it a little bit, make it a little bit less overwhelming for yourself.
I like that you use the word tools. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
what, making progress is. When you make
Mm-hmm.
a micro goal, or do you kind of have that big goal in mind as well sometimes?
Yeah, I think so. Because when you have the goal of like, so to use the book example again, your goal is to read 52 books for the year. But what your actual goal is, it's to read more, it's to learn about the world, it's to educate yourself, or it's to just like enjoy more of your time off your phone, for example. So instead of looking at the really, really big goal, try and find the kind of value behind the goal, whatever that value is. And that can be hard if you haven't identified your values, but that can also be really helpful. So finding the value, the actual reason why you wanted to set that goal in the first place, that can kind of be your driving factor behind what those micro goals look like. So if your goal, instead of reading 52 books, is to learn more or to spend more time not on your phone, then a goal of reading 5, 10 pages a day still helps you achieve that goal of wanting to educate yourself or wanting to stay off your phone.
Huh, that's good. That's really good. Oftentimes, people prioritize their work over their mental well being. How can people overcome the guilt of taking a break from work and taking care of themselves first?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Um, and I think it's something I definitely struggled with in my early career because I thought that not prioritizing my work meant that I wasn't passionate about my career. I associated like taking a break with not making progress toward my career goals or not doing everything I could um, to fulfill kind of like the dreams I'd had my whole life, the reason I went to college, the reason I worked hard in high school. So um, I think what changed that mindset for me was seeing what it's like to get burnt out. So burnout being like the feelings of just absolute exhaustion from overworking yourself, and that too can lead to a lot of mental health challenges. It can lead to it can lead to actually lower productivity and lead to you doing a worse job at work. So to be honest, it took me experiencing real burnout and seeing how that actually impacted me and impacted my progress towards my goals that made me take a step back and reevaluate what taking time for yourself versus taking time for work actually looks like. Um, and I think you kind of learn over time through your work that taking time for yourself is actually the better choice. Like you said, it does make you more productive to take a break. There's a lot of research behind that. Um, if if you're overworked, your brain's not going to be working as well. You're not going to be able to do the work that you want to do. And so, yeah, I think taking a step back and actually looking at when you are your best self at work and how you do your best work can help you realize that prioritizing yourself actually does lead to those things, as opposed to if I just work really, really hard, that's how I'm going to get to where I want to go.
Did you seek out anyone that you could maybe use as a role model, as a mentor that had better like work-life balance versus I know there's a lot of people in every profession that are just on that brink of burnout from not having work-life balance.
Yeah, I will be honest, like my current workplace very much prioritizes work-life balance, and that's helpful. I think it can be a lot harder when you are in a work environment or a school environment that everyone around you is prioritizing work over themselves. It's a lot harder to put yourself out on that line and say, well, I'm actually going to take more time for myself.
Yeah.
But when you are surrounded by others who are making that priority, it is a lot easier. I will say that. I think that to a degree, in certain settings, you can be the person that paves the way for others to do that, though. Um, I think, that again, that can be hard when you're early in your career and you're trying to make a name for yourself. You're trying to prove that you can do everything that you set out to do. But there's so much power in being that person that paves the way for others to take a break and actually like as a team, as a group, decide that your life and your mental health is just as important as your work or more important than your work. There's a lot of power in that too.
I like that. Little trailblazer. Uh, why is self-compassion an important practice, and how can people be kinder to themselves?
Yeah, self-compassion, it's something I'm like actively learning self-compassion. I feel like I've gotten to the point now where I can really step back and learn more about what it really means to be kind to yourself. And that's why I've mentioned it a few times already in this conversation, because I'm actively doing that work of being kinder to myself.
What does that
Um,
actively look like for you?
for me, it looks like not being mad at myself for things that aren't in my control. I feel like, especially with anxiety for a really long time, I would blame myself and say, it's my fault I'm anxious. There's something wrong with me. And I think getting through those feelings and getting through those emotions takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of self-compassion to say, no, there isn't anything wrong with you. Like this is a part of your life, and you can live alongside of it and have a very fulfilling life, even with anxiety. So things like that. And I think too, I recently started actually going to therapy for the first time, which is really exciting for me.
That is. How
Because
does that feel?
it feels good. I feel like I waited a really long time because of those feelings of the anxiety is my fault, or being almost ashamed of having anxiety and feeling like wasn't um I wasn't everything that I wanted to be. And that was a really kind of like bad feeling. And so whenever the topic of going to therapy or, somebody suggesting getting help for mental health, again, there's a lot of stigma around it still, I think. And my initial knee-jerk reaction was, no, I don't need therapy. There's nothing wrong with me. Because I was so like mad at myself internally for having these feelings. And it took a while
Almost
to get
self
over that.
stigma,
Yeah,
like
self
almost self
stigma.
stigma that you had, like versus other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And working through those emotions, it took a really long time. I think because it took me a long time to realize I had anxiety to like actually like figure out what that emotion and feeling was. Um, but I finally got to a point in my life where I had the resources to seek out therapy. I have the money to do so, and
Yeah,
I had the time and like I had my life together enough to like make this progress. And not
you're in
that
the
you
right
need
space.
exactly, not that you need to have your whole life together to go to a therapist. You definitely don't. But so yeah, I've been working with a therapist doing cognitive behavioral therapy, and a lot of that is based in self-compassion and finding different ways to talk to yourself. And so I'm actively learning how to do that. But one of my favorite things that I've learned from her actually is um, if you're just like beating up on yourself, saying really mean things inside your head, one way to show yourself self-compassion is to ask yourself, like, what would I say to a friend in this situation? Or would I ever say these things to my best friend or my sister or, somebody in your life that you really love? And I think that really worked for me because I am so nice to the people in my life. I try to be at least. And I would never say the things to them. I would never say the things I say to myself to a stranger. I would never say the
Right,
things I say to myself to somebody I actively don't like. Like
right.
it's
But
when
you're
you really
listening to
start
that dialogue in your head.
exactly, yeah. And when you really
Mm.
start to break it down that way, I feel like you can kind of take a step back and say like, wow, like that's actually a really silly thing to say to myself. It's a really not nice thing to say to myself. What's another thought I can have instead? And that's been one of my favorite ways to practice self-compassion. I'm sure there's a ton of other ways I'm going to be learning in the
I
near
like that you're
future,
putting the
but
work into learning it. Self-compassion is
yeah,
not I don't think it's a natural trait to have.
yeah, it's a challenge, but I think it's so important to overcoming anxiety and also just living your life in a happy way. Like I think having the best life you can. It's nice to show your it's nice to be nice to yourself.
I like that. It's nice to be nice to yourself. There's another
Yeah.
one that's kind of helpful is you can stand in front of a mirror and
Hmm.
you like think of what 30 seconds is. Just start at that. 30 seconds is a long time for this exercise, but you can only say positive thoughts, positive things to
Oh,
yourself.
that's a
It's hard.
hard one.
Yeah. And then
I'm gonna try
reset,
that
try
later.
again. Yeah. But the goal is to make it up to a minute. I think, and it's a
Wow.
tough one, but it's a good one.
Yeah, I
Well,
bet you
thank you.
60 seconds feels a lot longer when you're doing that.
Thanks
At
for
least at
just
first.
yeah, being open
Sorry.
and sharing a little bit of a new person experiencing therapy. I think there's some fear in that for people like, oh, like I don't know what that looks like and that's just all scary. So
Yeah.
therefore I'm going to avoid.
Yeah, I was definitely scared at first, and then I realized that especially CBT, it's so much like school. Like I feel like I'm taking a class in like mental health.
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yes, yeah. I just feel like I'm in a class, and so it the like
And
high achiever in me feels really really good about it.
your personality sounds like you are a learner, like you're going to be a lifelong
Yes.
learner. So that fits.
Yeah, yeah. So that's been
What
nice.
are you learning about cognitive behavioral therapy that you think like boil it down to the top three things or two things?
Um, So I'm still in the early days. I've only been doing it for like a month and a half or two. Um, but to boil it down, I would say it's very structured, which I like. I like that there's literal homework that she gives me every week. And so she'll say, okay, this is like the worksheet you're going to fill out. Pay attention to how you're feeling, the emotions you're feeling, write them down, and next week we'll go over them together. And there's something about having someone to be accountable to and to talk through kind of the emotions that you were feeling in a very structured way that I mean works. It resonates with me. I know it resonates with a lot of people. Like there's tons of research behind why CBT works and why it's useful for people. But it's also so far a lot about interrupting your thoughts and selecting new ones to put in place.
Mm.
So hard. It's really, really hard, but it's also really rewarding and it's worked so far. So far so good.
Interrupting your thoughts and replacing them. Interesting.
Yeah.
I looked on your website and I read about what stories are you telling yourself?
Yes.
And they really resonated with me because I have a spouse that is very good. He has a pretty high EQ, and he will sometimes use that with me, like, well, you are telling yourself a story, and automatic thoughts. What
Yeah.
share with us from your perspective versus my reading it and internalizing it to mine. um, that piece that you wrote?
Yeah, so this was I interviewed, oh gosh, I can't remember her name now, but I interviewed somebody who she'd written a book about this concept of the stories that you tell yourself. And really it's about any situation in your life and the story that you tell yourself about it. So um what's a good example here? Trying to think of a good example, but basically it's this idea of you have the power to change whatever you're telling yourself about a certain situation. So if something happens to you and you have kind of a very negative story that you're telling yourself about it, that's going to change the way that you approach the world around you. It kind of creates like a filter over all of the actions you take. Whereas if you kind of shift that story and you're able to tell yourself a different story that's maybe a more positive one, that can also change the way that your worldview looks. I'm trying to think of, do you have a good example of
I was
a
just trying to think
story?
of one as well because literally I hear this probably once a week. Like, well, that was a story you were telling yourself
Yeah.
versus this is what, and more maybe in a communicative, like in our way of communicating with one another, the assumptions that I make from my spouse's actions or his words or
Mm,
his lack of words, then this is what I internalize and tell the story that I tell myself versus asking maybe a clarifying question or stating like, when you did that, it made me feel like this.
yeah. Yeah.
But I can't think of a particular example.
Yeah. I'll try and think on it as we talk if I can come up with a good one.
So you talk a lot about acknowledging your emotions and those of your peers. What's kind of a tool or a skill set maybe to you for that, acknowledging your peers' emotions?
Oh, that's a good question. I think um acknowledging your peers' emotions, I've found that as somebody who feels very attuned to others' emotions, like I'm constantly assuming how other people feel. So I can walk into a room and kind of feel like, okay, like something's off. I don't know what's off, but I don't and then I'll be like, I don't feel comfortable, so I start getting anxious. And so I started just asking people. Like
Instead of
I think
assuming.
instead of assuming, and I think that's really the only way that you can really be attuned to those around you, because you don't know what people are feeling, and you don't know why things might be off for them. They might not want to tell you, they might not want to share or divulge that, especially in a work setting. But
Yeah.
I've found that like assuming what other people are feeling is the worst thing you can do. It gets you into a lot of trouble. And most of the time when you do ask somebody and you ask somebody in a respectful way of, hey, I don't want to intrude, but you seem a little bit off today. Do you want to talk about anything? Or um, maybe sharing a little bit about how you're feeling to kind of open the door for them to be honest with you and to bring their emotions or feelings to the table. I do think the important part here is making sure you do so and you ask these questions with respect and not like not asking out of the like blue or not presuming that they owe you an explanation, but really coming to a conversation with care. I think that's the like differentiating factor here. But yeah, I would say don't assume what others are feeling. Ask when you can, but do so with respect.
I like that a lot because when you started to talk about asking instead of assuming, I'm like, that's a tough thing. Like,
Yeah,
what does asking with care look like? Asking with respect. I've been on the receiving end of that and both sides. Like, somebody
mm-hmm.
asked me with a caring thing, and then another time, like somebody asked me, and it's like, ooh, and it's like, what vibe am I giving off that it
Yeah,
makes people think that I'm off or
it can
whatever?
be a fine line. Yeah, like somebody being like, "Oh, you look really tired today." It's like, "Okay, thanks."
Right,
Like,
right.
what does that mean? But I do think like there are ways to ask it, and it depends on how close you are with that person too. It depends on a lot of different factors, but
The setting
um
too, it's a little bit harder, like in a work setting versus with
absolutely.
your friends or your family.
Yeah, yeah. I just think whenever you can like step beyond assuming when you don't have to assume something, the better. But like you said, like you also don't want to cross any lines, especially in the workplace. Um, but yeah, I do think there are ways you can do it. Another way is to say, "Hey, I've been feeling really sad about the news lately. I wanted to check in and see how you're feeling." Like that's another way is priming it with something that you're feeling, opening the door for them, or even like saying, "We don't have to talk about it. I just want you to know that, I'm here if you need anybody."
Those are,
That can be helpful too.
those are great examples. Very good examples. Oh gosh, there's so much I wanted to talk about. I was looking at your article about the to-do list too, and I love that one.
Oh
So I
yeah.
guess I challenge our readers to look at their to-do list as young people head back to school. Like I am old school and I write things down, but a couple different
Yeah.
ideas of how you can maybe find a way to that might work better for you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I guess I have two more questions.
Okay.
Staying engaged for a long period of time can be challenging. So how do you stay productive and also take care of yourself and your personal needs?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, I'm definitely a short attention span kind of person. So this this resonates with me. I again, I think it's personalized. I think it's what is helpful to you. Um, I will say one thing for me that I really benefit from in terms of working from home is on really long meetings, I will actually have I have this drawing application on my iPad and I just doodle. I doodle during the meetings. And I find that that actually helps me pay closer attention to the people who are speaking and hear what they're actually saying. So I don't know if my coworkers would be cool with knowing that I do that, but it makes me a better employee. It makes me a better listener. So um, it improves my engagement and improves my ability to listen. Um, so that's one way. It's also something I really enjoy doing, and I'm able to do it at the same time. Again, walks is a huge one for me. So getting up from my desk, walking around my house, um, getting up in the middle of the day to go outside, that also really helps me re-engage. So again, I think it's finding the things that you really enjoy doing and finding ways to integrate them throughout your day. That can be really hard if you have a ton of work to do. But again, I think it's reframing your mind instead of saying, oh my gosh, I have so much work to do. I have to get all of this stuff done. It's reframing your mind to say, I'm not going to get everything that I need to get done if I don't take time for myself, or if I don't do the things that I enjoy, or I don't do the things that recenter myself and help me re-engage. So I think those things can be really helpful.
Perfect. So, Kelsey, the last question we end every podcast with is what does the world need to hear right now?
Oh, I think what the world needs to hear right now is we're living in a very anxiety inducing world right now. There's a lot of scary stuff happening, regardless of what's going on in your personal life. The larger world has a lot of anxiety inducing things. Um, and so I think to round out everything we've been saying, showing yourself a little grace if you are anxious right now. It's okay if you are. There's a lot that's happening. um, and just using the knowledge that you have to work through that and to be okay with the fact that you're anxious sometimes, because yeah, the world is anxiety inducing. Of course you're going to be a little bit anxious, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with you for feeling that way.
Perfect. At Robbie's Hope, we like to say it's okay to not be okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Kelsey, so much for joining me today on a hopeful conversation. Kelsey Alpaio, I think I got it right.
Yes.
Yay. Check her out. You'll find her in just Google her name, you'll find her. And to our listeners, be sure to tune in to our next episode. And until then, remember, hold on pain ends. Thank you.